Hey, so it's Jim Powell. I just finished the Carlin Common Sense podcast on second guessing the navigator. First half, he was talking about, I don't really remember now. Apparently, I didn't have a lot to pull from that one. Second half, he gave a lot of quotes. Maybe it's just my memory so poor, which that's true. And he gave a lot of quotes, which I can't remember all of them. But some of my thoughts that I guess pulled away from the whole talk, he talked a lot about how, or I get the feeling when I talk a lot about politics or hear a lot of discussions about politics, the more I learn, the more I feel like I have no good answers. You know, if I had, you know, I start going down these paths of being an ideologue in terms of either being, you know, a libertarian or a socialist or a Republican or a Democrat. I go back and forth between all these different views, but I find myself the more I read, the more I think about all these different problems, the more I realize that I don't really have any permanent solutions, because any solution is going to have a consequence. And my ultimate thought is that whatever we do, no matter what we do, there's always going to be an unintended consequence. No matter what law we pass, you know, it's always going to have some sort of ill effect that we don't want. If you take it back one step further, you can look at it from the perspective that there are no bad systems, there's just bad people. I mean, the people are the ones who try to skirt the system, find loopholes in the laws. I mean, we shouldn't even have to have laws to begin with. I mean, we have laws not to, you know, stop the good people, but the bad people. But whenever we do, you know, institute a law, it has unintended consequences, and it limits the freedoms of other people, even if it would be for a legitimate good. So I guess with that perspective, I go more towards the libertarian side of just, we need more freedom rather than more laws or more policies to fix things. Because if you lean towards freedom, you force people to act on their own behalf rather than having someone act for them. So one of the things he did talk about too was a lot about democracy versus, I guess, the republic form of government. Of course, there's lots of different forms of government, but those are the two quasi forms that we have in our country. We're not a true democracy. We're actually a republic. What that means, you know, is we elect our officials, and with the hope that they would make the best decisions for us. Some people think that they should just make them to be our voice, but that's more of like the lines of what a democracy is just really the majority rules kind of mentality. The idea being that people are stupid, and at least, you know, lots of people together are basically just lots of stupid people, and you would end up just making poor decisions, a poor direction, if it was strictly a democracy. So he balanced that between, you know, he gave lots of quotes saying things like there's a balance between democracy and freedom, or I mean, I should say equality and freedom, and in a way that they're almost polar opposites. The more freedom you have, there's the greater potential for inequality, but the more you try to make things equal, the more freedom you're going to have to restrict in order to obtain that equality, which is kind of disheartening if you think about it. It doesn't seem like it has to be that way, but it almost inevitably will be. So that's why one of the things that gets me going back to it is like, well, why is it bad? I mean, if the policies really aren't the problem, then what is the problem? Well, obviously the problem is the people. So how do we fix the people? You know, I think a majority of the time this comes across as from the left or from the liberals, or from secularists. They'll just say that it's education. If you were educated, you would be more inclined to do the right thing. But to contrast that with one of my favorite apologists or theologians, Ravi Zacharias, he would say that, you know, why do we expect any different from all these CEOs that are corrupt and doing wrong things when they go off to these these institutions, these college institutions where you take an ethics class, and the first thing they tell you is basically there is no absolute truth, and that it's all relative, and that, you know, there's lots of different ways you can build your moral framework within this world, and so by doing that, you can basically justify anything. I mean, and it's true, and I agree with Ravi Zacharias in that regard. I mean, from that perspective, you can justify genocide, you can justify anything underneath the sun that you want, whether it be instituting a policy within your company so that you limit the number of full-time, so you have much more part-time, so you can lower your costs in terms of having to have not have to pay for health insurance or pay them a respectable wage, or getting maximum utility actually from your efficiency in your workforce by having part-time people, because you're just trying to maximize productivity, so you have more part-time. But the obviously consequences of that is you're just treating people as a cog in the system, and this is kind of where all this fighting erupts from. You know, why people don't like capitalism versus why we should have more socialist societies. And of course, you know, I try to listen to both sides, and the more you listen to both sides, you see that both. I mean, there are good, valid points on both sides. You know, on the Republican side, it's kind of like, well, you have all these social programs, but and this is what Dan Carlin did talk a lot about, is that, you know, we back in the 60s, we had a 90% tax rate on the rich, on the super rich, I should say, and a 90%. So I mean, we're fighting over like a 4% tax increase on the super wealthy right now. And now Dan's not in for progressive taxation, which I'll talk about that later. But we had all these, you know, we tried to attack the war on poverty back in the 60s, and we instituted a lot of social welfare programs like urban housing, food stamps, a lot of these things. You know, even before that, you had FDR, who was instituting Social Security. And if you actually looked at what Social Security was designed prior to what it is today, it was a lot more, it wasn't as liberal. There wasn't as much to it. There was a lot more constraints on it, and the tax rate for it was a lot less than what it is now. And so we, I lost my train of thought. There's a cop coming up to the left of me, and I didn't want to get in trouble for speeding or talking into my camera phone. But anyways, and so lost my train of thought. So we have all these programs, and one of my common questions is, you know, if you have these social programs, what, you know, if the government's going to take over the responsibility of what I would say the individual should take care of, you know, what does that do to the souls of the people? You know, if you have the government that's going to provide the jobs, that's going to provide money, that's going to provide food, that's going to provide housing, that's going to look after the poor, well, what does that do to the hearts of the people? I mean, it makes them hard. They're like, well, why should I give money if all they're, you know, I see them, you know, they have government housing. Yeah, it's not great, but I mean, at least they have the roof over their heads. You know, what about food? They have food stamps. They can go get food if they want it. And, you know, so you have this hardening of people's hearts because of the fact that you have these government programs that are designed to take care of the people, and you don't have people willing to take care of each other, which is what the heart of it is. We really want people's hearts to care about other people. And so, you know, you hear terms like a bleeding heart liberal, and that's why they're pushing for more government. But it's kind of like, well, why are you not involved in a charity that's doing that kind of work if that's where your heart is? So, I mean, those are some of my, you know, my thoughts regarding that. Regarding the whole progressive taxation, I agree. You know, I guess it's one of those things where it's like I can agree and disagree all at the same time. And I think, you know, I can come with my point of views, and I can take the most diehard Republican and make them think twice about what their decisions are. Just as you could take anybody else and they could make me change my position on any of these things if we have a long enough discussion. And I think we'll eventually come to some sort of agreement, even though it'll be like we'll agree to disagree on what action should be taken to deal with any situation or any problem we're talking about. But as far as his views on, Ben Carlin's views on taxation, he likes the idea of a fair tax in the regards that everyone has some skin in the game. This is a term that you've heard a lot of Republicans use, which I agree. It's kind of like if you don't have any, you know, if you don't have any incentive to be more frugal with your money because you're using other people's money, I mean, why do you care? I mean, of course you're just going to always vote for taxations, and this is one of the reasons why we have problems with, like, Democrats, is because you can even see it. You know, these Democrats that get elected that are pushing for these social programs that get, you know, these mass numbers of people before, because who's not going to vote for free stuff? And you can just see it, and that's their whole reason for why they're in office, is just to hold a position because they can fight for entitlements for a voter base that's just going to keep getting them reelected. Which just is infuriating to me, to see people pouring people out, you know, to do that kind of, to win votes. That's not to say all Democrats are like that, but there are some that you can see it whenever they speak. It's just kind of like, it just comes out of their mouth. You know what they're going to say before they even say it. And it's not just on the Democrat side. You have Republicans that, you know, are essentially whores in the military, where, you know, they'll, you know, the military-industrial complex, where people of voting in Republicans because they just want to keep the war machine going, because they have companies that are backing and profiteering off of war and the you know, the making of weapons and things like that. So, you know, the more I think about it, the more it just seems like a big mess, and I have absolutely no clear decision other than just saying, if we just start stripping everything away, make things simpler. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I was for Herman Cain's 999 plan, just because it made things simpler. You got rid of the loopholes. You actually just had clear cut and dry, this is the taxation, here's what it's going to be. And I think that's why a lot of people do like the idea of a fair tax. It's because just keep it simple, and it seems more equitable, it seems more fair, and you don't have people getting away with, you don't have the super rich who are not even, you know, even though they're supposed to be under a progressive taxation, not paying hardly any taxes because of the way the tax code's written. So, and I guess that's, as far as the progressive taxation, and my point of view on that is, I mean, I agree, that's why I would explain why I'm for a fair tax, but at the same time, you know, if you read The Wealth of Nations, I agree with Adam Smith's, even his concern was that he believed that the super wealthy should pay more of a fair share, more than the fair share, and I have to find the quote, because it really is in there, and he's the founder of the whole, you know, capitalist theory, so this is why it's important whatever he has to say, because we always rely on, you know, the people that put a lot of thought into this, that they should put more money into it because of the fact that they have more money to begin with, and they should have it because they probably have a better idea of how to spend it, but at the same time they should be putting more towards public utilities and things like that. I guess one last thought, because this is something that I've been thinking about, my perspective is that we should always have, just let the two fight each other out between each other. You have private industry that becomes monopolistic, that disincentivizes competition, that tries its best to lobby against competition by creating rules and things like that that prohibit it, or it becomes too, the cost of entry into the markets are too high. And this is one of the reasons why corporations are a good thing, is because you have this massive consolidation of these big corporations to become dangerous because they don't work for the consumers, and they just, you know, make the consumers, you know, the customer base into just another piece of the puzzle, which is not a good thing, and I think most people would think that. But likewise, on the public side, you know, you have that. I'm driving on an interstate, which I'm glad that we have an interstate system. There's a lot of things that could be the public utilities, you know, our energy industry. People would say we need to just privatize all of industry. At the same time, you know, I was talking to a guy that would say, you know, he was a hardcore Republican, and he would say, well, in order to drive out all the efficiency, we would need like a supreme dictator, and we would and we'd do that, but then it'd be a communist nation. And it's kind of like, and that's not, you know, that's just off the table. That's just so horrible and wrong. So, you know, I'm just kind of like, what? I don't care, as long as we're, you know, I take where's the pragmatic party? The party that says, I don't care about ideologies as much as I care about just getting things fixed and done and letting it expire over a period of time and then revert back. So whether it be public or private, I don't care, as long as, you know, what we want to happen, and we can agree on it, which is by far the hardest part. How do we change a nation? How do we change the hearts of all these people? How do we get going into the direction of the pragmatic party? I don't know. The last thought was this: is that we get more people talking about it. It baffles me that the three things that we're not supposed to talk about, the taboo topics are God, sex, and politics, which are by far the most interesting things to talk about, and I don't understand why we don't talk about them more, since everyone's got an opinion on at least one of those three things. And they seem to be the things that most impact our lives, so why are we not talking about them more? And we all have an opinion of them to some degree. So that's my encouragement, is let's talk about it and educate each other by just being more willing to talk about that, rather than the crap that's being promoted on TMZ about so-and-so's life. Thanks.